As mentioned earlier, we as WEDO did, with others, did some analysis of those. But there are also other national communications to the UNFCCC Secretariat, and in those and in the greenhouse gas inventories, there's no reference, although these are technical reports. I think there is a need to look specifically also at least the gender impacts. So there is nothing mentioned in those communications. The NAPAs, we had a meeting in Vienna with, in which representative of the NAPA Management Committee was present, and he mentioned that gender equality is now, or only recently, a guiding principle in its design and advice to include gender expertise in the NAPA teams. And Rebecca has gone very much into detail on all these 38 NAPAs which have been developed already. But again, let's not just look for words in those national action plans, but let's look also for participation in the development of those plans, and more importantly, for action when they are implemented. And that means a lot of monitoring and watchdog functions for all of us. For you, just the next one, to see who are the main actors in the field of gender and climate change. You've heard and seen several of them already here. You've, of course, seen IUCN and WEDO, but there are some other actors. I've mentioned them here on this slide. Energia has been a network working also specifically all over the world, but also in Africa very extensively, on energy and gender issues. And I would recommend those interested in energy to really look at their website, and that will be mentioned. The Gender and Disaster Network is a network which existed already for some years, but looked at natural disasters more in general, but we are going to make linkages more and more amongst us as experts in these areas. The network of women ministers, and not only those of environment, but I think the women ministers for agriculture and for other elements, for economics, for example. It would be interesting to bring them together around climate change at one age. Okay, we go on, and I'm not going to mention everybody, but of course it's the initiative to form the Global Gender and Climate Alliance is a very important one, which was taken in Bali and which is really growing very fast in importance. Strategies applied, next one, by the NGOs and the different institutions are very diverse. First strategy is information generation and dissemination. That's what we are also here for, partly. We are sharing all the different experiences which you have and we have in order to draft a good gender analysis of the policies and to advocate. Advocating is still a very important element, yes. Increased disaster preparedness, I think the link which has been made not only in the title of this Congress, but also in our perspective on it, that disaster risk management and disaster reduction and climate change adaptation, but also even mitigation, should go together more and more. And last but not least, the awareness raising as climate change and gender being a concern of women and men, and I'm happy and I welcome our fellow male delegates here because I think that's so important. I'd like to give you one example of how women have been working at grassroots level on mitigating climate change and adapting to the changing situation. This is a Pintado Solar project in Brazil, and one of our fellow former board members of WEDO, Thais Corral, who works for the NGO WEDO and for the South-South North Network, is also in one of the organizers, but the main organizing committee there were local women. And in this project, which got the SEED award in 2008, the award from UNEP, IUCN, and UNDP, in that sustainable technologies, solar technologies, are being implemented and used and adapted in order to promote irrigation, water pumping, and access to water as a very important element to scale up the local farming and improve food security. I'd like to skip the next slide, otherwise my 5 minutes will be completely gone. Also the other one, you will all get it. There are major challenges, of course, ahead of us, but we will face them. And I'd like to finish with an action plan, which includes partly what has been said already this afternoon. I tried to define 9 steps. I don't know why it's 9, but these are 9 steps or 9 different elements which have to be taken, which we should really try to promote, and maybe you can think a little bit about them. First of all, apart from pushing the UNFCCC Secretariat, and Rebecca already mentioned that we really need to get text and a decision, so we have to not only develop and present, but also make sure that a decision on gender and climate, or gender mainstreaming and gender and climate change is adopted, if not at COP14, at least at COP15, but if possible at the next conference of parties. Another step is the information and research, and there I see that we are all starting doing more and more research, and I think that if we would have the possibility to interview all of you, we would have a major database on what gender and climate change means in your local realities. So there is lots of potential, and I just wanted to underline or to pull your attention to a recent publication of the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, who has a table there as well, which brings together lots of case studies and information on integrating a disaster risk reduction into climate change adaptation. Also, there are vulnerability assessments being made, and those have to be made more gender specific. Next slide, the institutional capacity, not only at the UNFCCC Secretary, but also at national level. I think there's lots to be done. The enhancement of women's involvement, Rebecca mentioned it, all of us mentioned it, but don't forget that we are also talking about local women being part of the decision making. So it's not only us going to those COP meetings, but specifically local women's voices and perspectives being heard at international, national, and regional levels. Number 5 is enhancing women's roles and positions, and it has been mentioned here already as capacity building. A specific one which I'd like to bring forward here is energy planning. For example, from Energia's work and all the work which was presented at the former CSD meetings, it's clear that energy poverty is one of the major elements which burden women's livelihoods, and integrate a gender perspective into energy planning and decision making is something which we really should enhance. The next 2 aspects have been mentioned by the former speakers, the adaptation funds and the other mechanisms, and I would like to specifically mention the CDM because with Women in Europe for a Common Future, for example, we are trying to promote a CDM program in the region, in the pan-European region, in the ECA region, because their energy poverty is also a major element, and climate change is really impacting to a large extent. So don't forget that the world around there are major problems. NAPAs I'm not going to speak on now, we have heard a lot. And last but not least, the legislative measures to construct a legal regime that ensures women's legal rights. The legal right of women to land, to resources, to a livelihood, etc., etc. I think if we could form a group working on those, I'm not a legal expert, but I think if we can join forces around these teams, that would be really very helpful, and it would ensure that governmental policies and programs on human rights, women's rights, and CEDAW incorporate, are coherent and reinforce each other. The last slide. When I was asked to do a paper on gender mainstreaming in climate change, I thought, oh, this is very theoretical and it's very abstract. And what I'd like to to emphasize here, when we talk about gender mainstreaming, let's embrace local realities in all our policies and actions so that we can make that bridge, can try to make that bridge really come very close and bring the local voices to the tables. And we will continue, I'm sure, as we said at the WAVE conference in 2004 in Nairobi, we all will continue our struggle for a peaceful, just and healthy planet.